2024, the year of cinema garbage that just wouldn't go away. Full of remakes, sequels, and mostly trash, it didn't disappoint when it came to bad movies. The craziest part of all, one movie studio released 3 of the 5 worst films of the year. Yes indeed, Lionsgate is like a small intestine the way they produce shit, shout out to Step Brothers. And the movies were so bad they forced me to make out-of-theater reactions, sitting there like an ass with my sunglasses on. They turned me into that guy. For whatever reason, I never got around to reviewing them at the time of their release, so this end-of-year tally of the worst movies on the calendar is now complete. Here you'll find a review for The Crow, Megalopolis, and Borderlands in this compilation video, flanked by Madam Web and Rebel Moon 2 I released earlier this year. And what makes these movies horrible? That's what we're here to find out. One of them is so bad if you ask me to watch it again, I'd give you the RoboCop.
Ah, fuck you!
In addition to the worst films, I've also included my top 3 best movies of 2024, because you gotta have balance. But just like every year, there's more bad than good, so let's get this thing moving. This video will bring you through the year, the timeline of trash in chronological order, and everything is timestamped for your convenience in case you've already seen one of my reviews. Now kick back and relax and get ready for a laugh as we go through the best and worst, starting with Madam Web. Madam Web is like Whoopi Goldberg on The View. It sounds like a bad idea until you see the results.
His wife to pay that was gas.
I called Morbius the Room of Superhero Origin Movies, and I don't know if it can hold that title anymore because Madam Web exists. To be fair, the writers of Morbius also wrote Madam Web, so just know that, much like Whoopi, these guys absolutely do not miss when it comes to producing ass. This movie is a goldmine, and if you've seen it, you understand why everyone's having a field day with it. Even a small town theater in my home state posted this to entice people to see it. No way to sugarcoat this one. Couples have been coming in together just to see how laughably bad Madam Web truly is. It's almost like the feel-good movie you didn't know you needed. The moment that happens once or twice a year where everyone, regardless of our differences, collectively gather around a single piece of media and agree,
"This is shit! This is a table of shit!"
Madam Web outdoes every awful Hollywood film I've reviewed since I started this channel because it's inept in areas of filmmaking I didn't even know existed. Like when I'd try to explain a guitar riff to my bandmate back in the day. Films like The Room and Madam Web, and it's outrageous how appropriate that comparison is, give you an appreciation for areas of movie making Hollywood's mastered to the point you take them for granted, like basic sound mixing of dialogue that would make Christopher Nolan blush.
Speak of the devil, and he shall appear.
I've been searching for that spider for years.
Horrible films like The Marvels, Indiana Jones 5, or Thor: Love and Thunder still have technical aspects right, parts of the filmmaking art form that are undeniably good. Cinematography, even the CGI generally speaking, has a baseline of quality. We can complain about the CGI in Doctor Strange 2 all we want, but just get through the first 5 minutes of Madam Web and you'll have a new appreciation for what an abomination can be. Every single superhero movie cliche is on full display, and it fills all stereotypes for what makes a bad Hollywood script. Throughout the entire film, everything is explained through the most exposition-heavy, stilted dialogue you could possibly fathom, filtered through characters who work great in other mediums, but are given a bare-bones treatment in the movie that renders their motives absolutely idiotic. And it's all brought to you by actors who do not give a damn about the movie they're in, because it's clear on their faces they were aware they are in a piece of shit while they were filming it. For crying out loud, Dakota Johnson has been a godsend to content creators in trying times. Firstly, no one asked for a Madam Web movie, and it's the Sony Spider-Verse. We're talking about Venom and fucking Morbius here, folks, so no one's going to be disappointed if this movie sucked. It was expected. But how abysmal the movie was came off in her interviews, and I can confirm, the way she acts in the movie is almost identical to her demeanor in the interviews. She was the dude. She is Lebowski. She did not give a rat's ass, and it's incredible to watch. Every time she would do an interview, content creators were surely going nuts. If you're strapped for time, the first minute of the movie will do the trick. In 60 seconds, you'll get a whirlwind of horrible audio, so much horrendous quick zoom shaky cam bullshit it would make Zack Snyder jealous, and dialogue that's worse for writing than this woman is for racism.
I want to be ninja. I learned to chop real hard. I fight with credit card.
I really cannot stress enough what an absolute turd this movie is. The title of this video was carefully chosen, obviously, right? Because truly, there hasn't been an awful movie I've had the pleasure of talking about like this in quite some time. It really is something special, and I dare you to go see it for yourself. Spoilers ahead, because I feel like the best way for me to shit on this thing is to just go through the movie. Before we dive in, a quick word about the sponsor of this video. And like always, my friends, I timestamp everything for your convenience. So yes, you can skip it, but if you do watch it, it is always greatly appreciated, and I fucking love you. With seasons changing, I'm already dreaming of a warm weather getaway. I love using points for travel, and I'm always looking for ways to earn more to book my next flight. And like me, are you tired of paying for rent and getting nothing but a roof over your head in return? Here's a life hack for you. Built lets you earn points on rent payments and redeem them towards flights, hotels, and a lot more. Because honestly, shouldn't one of your biggest expenses start working for you, instead of just being a bottomless pit where money goes to die? Imagine earning valuable rewards just for paying rent and living your everyday life. Sound too good to be true? Not with Built. They've been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. There's no cost to join Built, and as a member, you'll earn valuable points on rent and on your everyday spending around your neighborhood. Built points can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties around the world that you can redeem your Built points toward. And get this, you can also redeem your points towards a future rent payment. Or if you want something a little more exotic, you can redeem them towards a unique experience only Built members can access. Because with Built, it's not just about making life easier, it's about living life to the fullest. With the Built loyalty program, you can earn points to redeem on a ton of amazing things. Been dying to go on that dream vacation? Put some points toward flights and hotels. Been putting off that New Year's resolution to look like Chris Hemsworth? How about redeeming your points toward a fitness class so you can have those biceps you were always dreaming of? Built is a loyalty program that lets you earn points on rent and redeem them towards flights, hotel stays, fitness classes, and even your next rent payment. So if you're not earning points towards your rent yet, my question is, why not? Start earning points right now when you sign up through the link in the description or the QR code on screen. And make sure to use my URL so they know I sent you. Shout out to Built for sponsoring this video, and now back to it. We start, of course, in the past. Location, the Peruvian Amazon, where a pregnant Mama Web is looking for a spider because the movie's called Madame Web. She's with Super Mario's French-Algerian counterpart named Ezekiel, and the two characters have some exposition for us. They spew it out by communicating like aliens trying to mimic a human conversation. He asks her if she's found the spider, to which she replies, "Not yet." She then explains to him the importance of the spider, to which he responds with more information detailing the importance of the spider, to which she responds with more details about what they're doing and why. Okay, there's a lot to get into already. First, the poor actor playing French Super Mario is let down by a bad film, for sure, but he's no good here at all. He's awful actually, but in a delightful way. Almost all of his dialogue is ADR'd in because he delivers every line in this groveling tone that microphones in the year 3000 wouldn't be able to pick up. And I can do one hell of an impression of this guy. I'm already at a moment where I wish I could just play you the damn movie because it speaks for itself, but I'll give you an example of the dialogue to set the tone for the rest of the breakdown. Because if I went over every time it's like this, we'd be here all night, and this is not a Little Platoon video. Here's an example of the dialogue, and you can hear my impression of French Mario. I thought you were close to finding the spider. Well, it'll be worth the wait. Dead specimens show that the peptides in the spider's venom, they basically supercharge their cellular structure. That spider can give superhuman strength, like La Salagna. La Salagna, the mythical spider people who run across the treetops and punish evil men with their black poison touch. I'd rather base my research on science, not legends, Mr. Sims. Those powers are wasted here. These little spiders have the power to cure hundreds of diseases. The ham-fisted delivery coupled with the absolute joke they call dialogue. Exposition is best delivered when you're not even realizing it because it comes out naturally between two people having a conversation. I don't expect that kind of perfection in superhero movies or comic books, but this movie sounds like if AI asked AI to write a script. And the prompt was, what would aliens think a script about Madame Web would sound like if it were written by the architect from the shitty Matrix sequels and he had a kid in the resource room? Not 2 minutes into the movie and you already know this is like Stephen A. Smith. You cannot take it seriously.
You know what? I kind of like Charizard. The fire on the tail, the wings, he can fly.
Why are these characters saying these things to each other here and now? They're not just now running into each other, they're here together for a particular reason, but they're talking like this is all news to both of them. These would be things they already know and have talked about. That's what led them here in the first place. They're not even really talking, they're just telling us, the audience, what they're doing. Character X, I am doing this and looking for this right now. Yes, you are character Y, and you are looking for that because of this reason. Yes, and that reason is important to me. Yes, it is important to me as well, although it is a different reason than yours. The movie really is the worst possible version of every early 2000s superhero movie cliche, which Madame Web seems to not just take place in that era, but stuck in a film school version of it. Remember in the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man, when Peter and Harry met at the genetics lab? The person guiding the tour explained to the class what the spiders were being used for, what each were capable of, and while clunky, and yeah, it was campy, but that's Raimi, at least it made sense how we received that information because students were being taught something, so we the audience were too. To open Madame Web, it's like ChatGPT was asked to replicate that opening, but for a Spider-Man spin-off movie. Again, why are these characters discussing this now? At minimum, they would have already had this conversation just to get them to Peru in the first place. Then Pepe Le Pew takes some photos of her research behind Mama Web's back, which is rendered completely pointless 2 seconds later when she runs in screaming that she found the spider. You know it's a special moment because the camera does that slow-mo zoom-in effect on it like someone asked AI to replicate the worst of Zack Snyderisms. The movie's already breaking down, but it's like 3 different styles of movie all happening at once, and they're all shit. Macron goes on a fucking rampage immediately shooting and killing everyone around him, and Miss Webb's like, why are you doing this? And he's like, because no one cared about my family, so now I don't care about anyone. And she tussles around with him for the spider, and he accidentally shoots her because obviously, and for whatever reason, he looks regretful he killed this person he clearly doesn't know very well, but was totally fine with the 4 or 5 others. This one just pushed him over the edge, I guess.
The guy who's got about as much charisma as Joe Frazier present day. By the way, Joe Frazier's dead!
Then spider angels descend from the forest heavens and sweep her up in the most comically bad bit of CGI in the movie. Now, take a look.
Holy shit, dude. The dudes at Little Caesars are fucking wild now.
They try to save her, but the spider's powers can't undercut this canon event, so she dies. The baby lives because she's the main character, and Spirit Spider Guy says that the baby is strong and she'll be back for answers one day. Yeah, instead of taking in the baby girl or finding any family member at all to take care of her, the spider angels somehow, some way get her back to New York so she can be an orphan instead.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
Alright, so that's the first 5 minutes. We now cut to the year 2003, a year that the filmmakers absolutely do not stick to at all, with some hilarious technological and pop culture inconsistencies later in the movie, like a PSP floating around when it wasn't released until 2005, or Britney Spears' song Toxic playing a major role in the movie, even though it didn't come out until 2004, but we'll get to all that. No, right now we're following around Cassie, the special spider child now all grown up in her depressive mid-30s millennial period, and she makes us believe she really cares about the person in the ambulance she's driving when she says, "They're not going room temperature on my watch." Dakota Johnson is a pretty solid actress, so I'm taking the characterization of her character as her simply not giving a fuck. Like I said, she plays this woman like a Lady Lebowski, and the movie's all the better for it. Her riveting dialogue delivery will put her in Oscar contention. Just take a look.
I hate to break it to you, Scrooge, but you can't change anything.
She almost hits one of the 3 teen girls who's intertwined with the plot and has a run-in with another a few seconds later in the hospital. You know, the one played by Sydney Sweeney's boobs. Is it fate? Is it coincidence that she'll be running into them again? The potential themes are bubbling over in this one. I'm sure they'll explore them. Oh wait, this movie's Madame Web. No, they won't. And that's a real shame because I'd love to see how incompetent they could really get trying to explore a theme. The cardboard cutout of a character, Cassie Webb, showcases how disgusting the concept of family is to her by pretending not to understand a gift a child gives her. And she says things to a coworker like, "Ew, neither of us like family stuff," and talks about being an orphan during natural conversation. We do some further forced character exploration when Cassie gets back home, and she apparently lives above the 3rd teen who's going to end up as a spider person. The AI-produced script has checkmarked all relevant characters introduced. Cassie, and every time I hear Cassie, my PTSD from Ant-Man 3 is triggered.
Cassie, 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 Cassie!
So Cassie triggered herself, decides to paw through her mother's old papers and journals. And apparently she's only ever looked at it. She's never actually read any of it. You see, later the plot needs her to, so she reads through this stuff for the first time ever. She has spent her entire life not knowing what really happened to her mom other than she looked at spider buttholes because she didn't take the time to read any of the things her mother left her conveniently in a box. This movie's so fucking good. But before all that happens, we get to enjoy this line. I hope the spiders were worth it, Mom. I hope the spiders were worth it, Mom. Whether this was the first draft, third draft, someone somewhere wrote that and other people signed off on it. How many channels does a movie go through and every single time this reached a new person for approval, it got the okay? Imagine being the person who wrote, I hope the spiders were worth it, Mom, and thinking, fuck yeah, boy. Just submitting that with absolute confidence. And hell, it got approved. I hope the spiders were worth it, Mom. Excuse me while I throw myself into traffic. And back to traffic where Cassie and Uncle Ben, yes, it's that Uncle Ben, played by Adam Shits and Gigs Scott.
Look, I got my real estate license a few years back for shits and gigs.
These two are helping a man involved in a car crash, and he obviously doesn't have health insurance because they just release his seatbelt and he falls flat on his fucking head. Like, welcome to America, brokey. This is Express Care. Have a concussion on us. Then Cassie gets trapped in the car as it falls off the bridge and she dies? Well, sort of, but she's brought back. The real miracle here is Uncle Ben, who apparently dived off a fucking bridge, swam down to the sinking car, single-handedly opened the door or busted the window, pulled her out, dragged her to safety, and resuscitated her. And he's not the hero of the fucking movie. He had to have ripped open a car door with thousands of pounds of water pressure on all sides, and he's not a superhero? Okay. 50 Shades starts having deja vu around a nonchalant Derek, so she decides to go home to sleep this silly day off. Meanwhile, our implacably accented villain flexes Riz and bags an NSA agent, and after sleeping with her, has a nightmare, or a fever dream if you're a kinky one, where mid-30s Sydney Sweeney in a skin-tight suit beats the shit out of him with the help of her friends. Our villainous villain says to the NSA woman that he's had the same nightmare forever, and quote, you have no idea the torment and torture of dying over and over again. Yeah, he's gonna kill them before they kill him in a hypothetical future. The scene is like a high school student wrote it, and that's really the entire movie, but this is the bare bones way to solve a problem. The villain needs tech that shouldn't exist in the time the movie takes place, so to solve this, the script has him sleep with an NSA agent in a throwaway scene and steal the codes she has to the tech he needs. And he didn't need to sleep with her to steal the codes, he's just that fucking toxic. Know how we know all this? Because he just says it out loud in conversation that's as natural as Kim Kardashian. He grabs her arm and she immediately says, how are you poisoning me? Like she'd have any clue what's actually happening, but the writer knows, so now she does. That was easy. He promises he'll stop poisoning her if she gives him the code to the tech he needs, so she does, and he's like, I lied, and kills her. Obviously. But then he says my favorite line in the entire movie. As she's dying, he says, believe me, it was a good thing you had no idea today was the day you were going to die.
Yes! That's awesome!
Let's check on the writer's room again after this one. So just to recap what we have so far, it sure is lucky that 50 Shades had a near-death experience so her powers were activated, and it sure is convenient that the facial recognition bullshit tech the villain needs exists just as the people he's hunting are old enough to resemble their older selves, that he's seen in a fucking vision where they're wearing masks. Also very lucky for him that top-secret NSA technology requires a single 8-digit code to access. And did you know if you kill an agent and start using it, the NSA won't suspect a thing literally ever? They don't care about missing tech and will never come after you. Hard to argue against that level of convenience. We catch back up with Cassie and her friends drinking at a baby shower for a future Peter Parker. 50 Shades grabs a Pepsi instead of booze, and after scooting around not being able to say Peter Parker in the movie instead of avoiding it altogether, because how else would they display incompetence at every level if they didn't hit it at every level, the now intoxicated EMTs get an emergency call and drive off to the drunken rescue. They arrive at a fireworks factory, and whether it's active or abandoned is unclear, but will it come into play later? Absolutely. And they're rescuing people from an apparent fire, something collapsed? Who knows? The film decides that's unnecessary information, and suddenly Cassie has a premonition that her boss, or whoever the fuck, is going to get in a car accident. She's now had multiple occurrences like this that have proven to be true. So when she sees him taking a call and recognizes he's about to hop in a vehicle and leave, she moves swiftly to prevent him from driving away. Just kidding. She half-heartedly asks him if she can drive. He declines. And then, like a scene out of Final Destination after it went the comedy route, the camera turns around and fucking wham! Her boss gets his clock absolutely cleaned. She runs over and has his blood actually on her hands, so about as subtle as an anvil on the head, but hey, maybe he would have seen the guy coming if he hadn't been drinking at the party 30 minutes ago. Cut to our shoe-phobic villain, and he and his lackey have their bullshit AI NSA tool figure out what the girls in his vision would most likely look like at present. She's taken aback that they're going after teenagers, to which he responds, yes, they are teenagers now, but in the future, they have powers and they will try to destroy me. I came from nothing, less than nothing. This villain will go down in infamy. This guy fucking rules. Meanwhile, Cassie is doing the cliche movie thing where a character is watching something that's reflecting their own life before she reluctantly decides to go to the drunk driver's funeral. Incredibly, all three girls are on the same train Cassie's on. Is it fate? Is it coincidence? Does it matter? No. Cassie starts getting deja vu again, and the scene Groundhog Days the hell out of itself, bashing the viewer over the head to really drive the point home that this is happening. By the time you see the same old creepy lady for the 6th time, you're kinda ready to move on. Shoeless Wonder is dressed in his Spider-Man costume, and why this looks so similar to Spidey has to be a coincidence canon-wise, or it would change Spider-Man's origin in the future. Imagine this universe's Spider-Man getting inspired by anything out of this movie. The superhero genre practically exists for the lulz at this point, so maybe. Hey, as long as something in this movie looks like Spider-Man, right? Can't be having a Spider-Man spin-off without Spider-Man, you know? Well, the costume must have some comic book origin, right? Nope. Just for the sake of explanation, in the comics he doesn't wear shoes because he can't stick to walls as well as Spider-Man can. But here in the movie, that can't possibly be the reason because he wears shoes when he's dressed as not Spider-Man. I guess this version of him just loves ringworms. The guy is chasing after them, and instead of shooting them with a gun or anything else, I guess he's going to accomplish the thing he's been obsessed with, finally getting rid of these women who have haunted his dreams by appearing in broad daylight in a rubber bodysuit. He's rich, so he could have hired a hitman, or hitmen, or hit people, or he could have, I don't know, bought a gun, or many guns, but he doesn't even wear shoes, so that's wishful thinking, I suppose. No, to accomplish his mission, that money is best spent on a gimp suit. Cassie ropes all the girls together who just believe what she's saying and go with her. She commits Grand Theft Auto to escape the clutches of shoeless leather Borat, and I'm pretty sure Tommy Wiseau wrote the rest of the movie. Villain yells at Hench Lady for not using his stolen tools good enough. No, really, here's the quote. I went through a lot of trouble to steal you these tools. Use them better. And then some stuff like this.
This is still not a kidnapping, okay?
Feels like a kidnapping.
Cassie brings them to a forest that's green screen appearance is painfully obvious, and she has them just kind of hang here while she goes home and rummages through the journals her mom left her, for the first time ever. Some extremely forced humor is injected into the scene, which, shocker, the only time the movie isn't funny is when it's actually trying to be, which also proves they were taking this shit seriously. It's only February and we're in Oscar territory, baby. These movie versions of their comic counterparts are perfect for their time. Sydney Sweeney's character just needs a hug, the Mexican one's father was deported because LOL at the stereotype, and the other one is a victim of being the kid of a rich father.
This is the type of chick that does jujitsu because it's the only way she'll get a hug.
The movie's on fast forward through its descent into madness from here. Even though a madman was just trying to kill them, they become bigger victims of pancake cravings and head off to a diner. Cause why not? The girls spot some guys at a table and decide to hit on them because, again, why not? And this is where Britney Spears comes into play because of Toxic, a song that released a year after this movie takes place. They could have just grabbed a song that actually came out that same year, or just have the movie take place in 2004 if the song is that important. Because I mean, hey, the villain is poisonous, can't pass up that kind of opportunity, am I right? Either way, the message Sony sent was,
I don't give a fuck.
Fair enough.
Don't give a fuck.
So the girls are dancing on tables in the middle of a diner because that's absolutely a thing that happens. And who interrupts the cockblock Sydney Sweeney but our foot fetish bad guy? Not to worry though, Cassie's on the way, who's still driving around in her stolen taxi. Like it's no big deal. Tracking a license plate would seem like an obvious thing to do for both the seemingly disinterested police and our Epstein-esque bad guy, but nah. She imitates her deceased boss's driving skills and smashes the stolen vehicle right into the diner, then drops the girls off at Uncle Ben's to keep her story intertwined with Spider-Man's. Before she leaves to Peru to get answers, yes, this is just kind of how this movie goes, point A, point B, 2020 AI. Before she leaves, she teaches the girls how to give CPR in one of the most poorly acted scenes in the movie. And you can tell it's almost entirely because of the direction. Ignoring the fact they aren't even giving CPR properly, it's edited like an actual CPR training video, where they high-five and tell each other they did a good job. Anyway, lucky for Cassie, the 3,400 miles from New York to Peru only takes like an hour for her, so she's just kind of there now. She meets the tribal chief Roman Reigns, and they rip off the soul displacement scene from the first Doctor Strange with reckless abandon. She finds herself in the realm of shoddy CGI and learns the truth about her mother trying to cure her daughter's disease, and that she basically has the ability to see the future. That spider sure is powerful, not enough to save her mom, but you know. Big Dog even manages to give Cassie a gross mongoloid version of with great power comes great responsibility. They might as well have written with responsibility great, come a power do. And damn it, wouldn't you know it, Mary Parker is going to give birth to Peter. Ben's with her and has no choice but to call an ambulance, meaning foot fetish Felix uses his bullshit tech to track him. Cassie takes the express lane and gets back to New York faster than she traveled to Peru, and the GTA addict takes another vehicle. This time the ambulance that was going to pick them up in the first place, so okay, this is happening now. But the villain gets his S-tier badge in one of my favorite moments in the film. When she slow-mo flies the ambulance at him, he decides not to jump out of the way, but jump into the direction she's flying in and completely eats shit. If that doesn't convince you to watch Madam Web, what are you still doing here? Next, she drops herself and the girls off at the firework factory. This place again. I guess the explosion and death and chaos from a couple days ago didn't get the city motivated to remove those check notes abandoned fireworks. The movie assures us they'll work together to stop this foot fiend. Want to know how? The script has them tell us. And I mean just straight tell us. Like the writer thought to himself, how can I show the girls won't be impulsive this time? I'll have one of them say, we won't be impulsive, Cassie. Writing is on fucking God mode. This movie is unstoppable now. Despite not even a hint of a training montage to pretend like she practiced using her powers, she has somehow mastered her abilities to a point where she can set up a trap for Feet Man. A helicopter explodes, one of the teens skates on a piece of metal because skateboarding is her singular character trait, and eventually the villain is taken out by the hands of Sony's product placement team. I'm not sure if associating your sugary diabetes-inducing product with killing someone is the right move, but that's why I'm not running Pepsi. I wonder if this was written into the script. Pepsi sign falls on villain. Most likely not, but I really hope so. And if so, please get the spelling right on the Oscar. Cassie gets hit by a random fireball right in the eyes and is paralyzed from the waist down after hitting the water. Guess she didn't see that coming, but why would she when canon requires her to be a blind paraplegic and the movie's almost over? Doesn't matter how random it seems, it gets the job done. This entire movie reminds me of Billy Madison trying to write Z's in cursive, and he tries to bullshit his way through it because hey, you know what he meant. The movie ends with Cassie, now Madam Web, embracing the fact she doesn't hate kids anymore because now she sees the girls as family. Her transformation into the spider version of Professor X is complete with wheelchair. And she concludes the movie in a cheap costume that looks like it was made by the Arrowverse wardrobe department, and she says, you know the best thing about the future? It hasn't happened yet. There's probably a few people at Sony that would like to go back in time and change the future of this movie, but I don't. It's going to go down as a cult classic. I'm calling it. You know a movie like this is destined to be something when the credits rolled, a theater staff member walked up to tell me the movie had no post-credit scene. And he said, which is a good thing because this movie sucks. Can you ask for a better endorsement? A failure in every capacity to a degree unseen in decades makes Madam Web somehow, some way, one of the more entertaining movies of the year in a train wreck sort of way. A follow-up video taking a look at how poorly Sony's handled this universe, or amazingly, depending on who you ask, is imminent. Rebel Moon Part 2 is where Zack Snyder finally fell into self-parody, like if Jim Carrey did Ace Ventura 3 and just talked out of his ass for 2 hours. What began as an abandoned Star Wars script that even Kathleen Kennedy had the brains to throw in the trash, the Rebel Moon series is on pace for up to 6 entries. That's if they keep filming 2 at a time, according to Snyder himself. So look forward to Rebel Moon Part 2, Part 2, coming this fall, or would it be Rebel Moon Part 3, Part 1? What about director's cuts? Does that mean 12 movies will disgrace our screens? We need an extended cut, just for the scene where the musicians from Titanic are present for the assassination of Carrie Elwes. To prep you for what you'll find in this movie if you dare click play, one-dimensional, unlikable human septic tanks for characters that are fucking morons. I swear some of these characters are so stupid it's like they were breastfed till they were 26. They spout dialogue that'll make you wince and inhabit a world of nonsensical, piecemeal lore displayed on a platter of shitty visuals and choppy editing. Even down to the editing. So far, it adds up to over 4 hours of scenes, setups, characters, and scenarios that remind you of the movies they were ripped off from and how much better those are. Lightsabers? Fuck yeah, we got those. But this time the bad guys have the blue ones and the heroes have the red ones. Haha, subversion. And then there is grain. Yes, grain, not to be confused with spice. What's up, Dune? Grain is the centerpiece of the movie and is all important until the movie decides it's not. If that all sounds dumb as hell, just wait until you see it all in slow motion.
People would think I was known for slow motion. I like slow motion. I don't really like slow motion that much.
Despite all the praise for the on-the-schnoz pseudo-intellectual symbolism and overtones, Snyder hangs his hat on his visuals. But Rebel Moon looks like Snyder's satire. All of his normal visual cues are here, and they look like shit. And I mean actual shit. A lot of shots have a fish-eyed, smeared look to them. It's a movie full of references, but zero originality. Almost every single character, set piece, and scene can be found in your memory banks. They can't even be confused for homages here because they don't create a coherent story. It's a disjointed mess of unintentional Easter eggs. Yep, saw that scene in Matrix Revolutions. That's a Star Wars reference. Oh, okay, Hobbiton. Oh, this movie's just super shitty Star Wars. If I had to endure this, it deserves a lampooning, which is always cathartic with movies like this. And now the story of Rebel Moon Part 2. The Scargiver. We find ourselves with Anthony Hopkins recapping the last movie, making sure to leave out key elements that paint characters as absolute dipshits. In fact, if you just heard the plot and don't confuse it for Star Wars, you might even be intrigued. In case you've forgotten the last film, and who couldn't? It followed a space soldier collecting Fortnite skins to protect a small village from the Imperial Empire. Our heroes return back to the moon Velt to celebrate their victory against the Empire's admiral and his army. In fact, they're so excited that when they get back home, they tell everyone that the admiral was defeated and his ship will now return to the Imperial Motherworld so everyone's safe. That's right, the Empire wouldn't care what happened to their soldiers and send an even bigger army down to absolutely obliterate you. You're home free. Let's feast. One character even says there won't be any need to lay down lives. They've already won. Except for the people in the last movie who died for the cause, you know, like Ray Fisher, the guy famously out of work but friends with Snyder, who could have given his out of work buddy a recurring role in his tragic 6-movie deal, but he's only in the first movie and dies within 20 minutes. Then a character walks into the room and says, JK, they're still alive, they'll be here in 5 days. That's right, our slithering villain has been resurrected and he's headed straight for them. And thank God, because he was the only good part of the last movie. He wakes up from his resurrection with apparent brain damage and even displays superhuman powers. He picks up a guy by the throat with one hand. Whoa, I guess bringing him back really altered. I'm just kidding. This setup has no payoff and is lost like a fart in the wind. He's shown to have supernatural powers. He seems to be even eviler. Then nothing happens with this, and just like Matthew Broderick committing manslaughter, it's forgotten about. Morpheus says death isn't always deterrent enough for the designs of the Motherworld, and thinks they must really need that grain, even though the villain called our lead hero Korra the most wanted villain in the universe. But she said he's mistaken, so that's that. They just believe her. Must be the fucking grain. He devises a plan to border all the buildings with bags of grain, because the villains won't blow that up. They need the grain. Funny thing is, at the end of the movie, Morpheus tells Korra he knew she was lying and that the bad guys really were after her. So the grain doesn't really matter to them, unless the script needs them to.
Certainly not the plans of a farmer. Seems General Titus hasn't drunk away his roots just yet.
Wait, let's just take a step back here for a second. In the last movie, Admiral What's-His-Fuck mentioned there were machines that could do all of this harvesting for them. Robots who aren't rebellious little shitheads like these guys that don't have to be fed. So at what point would keeping you alive be an option at all once the bad guys arrive?
I don't care.
Oh, right. Snyder doesn't remember things that happened in the previous movie, sometimes previous scenes, baking contradictions into the story and painting characters that are already paint by numbers as also a bunch of little Forrest Gumps running around the universe. Absolute dumbasses happenstancing their way through life. Even though everyone's shocked at the idea of Admiral Bullcut still being alive, Titus gets all cryptic and alludes to the Motherworld possessing resurrection level tech. He just knows that shit too, cause why the fuck not? Next, we get a contender for the most mind-numbing shit in the entire movie. A scene that's incredibly bizarre, but not in that, well, it could be genius way. It's one of those moments where high schoolers unironically praise it because it does the thing. The scene is a flashback where Korra kills the princess, which turns her into the most wanted person in the galaxy. See, the king's daughter was so nice that it started making him nice. Before, he was a warmongering death machine, but now his daughter's glow has got him turning over a new leaf. You know, that way you're somehow supposed to care when he dies, I guess. Korra's mentor doesn't like that because he's just evil, you know? So he plots to kill the king and his family, and he promises to protect Korra if she kills the daughter. Well, all this happens, in slow-mo of course, while the Titanic band, as mentioned earlier, is actually playing the score in the background of the scene. Then Cary Elwes speaks in his ever-so-Cary Elwes way and gets assassinated. And Korra's psycho mentor, who's played by the worst actor in Hollywood today apparently, says, "Kill her." Exactly like that too. And she does this willingly. She only kills the girl because her shitty-wigged mentor promised to protect her from repercussions. Psych, the treacherous guy is being treacherous and he blames it all on her.
Run, bitch! Run!
Pause. I can't even fucking stand it. Okay, so our hero killed a little girl because she thought she wouldn't get in trouble for it. So we're supposed to feel bad for her that she was duped. Duped by a guy who dupes everybody. That makes sense. And her pubically bearded father figure makes her kill the girl, not for any particular reason other than making her feel guilty about it, I guess. Because I mean, he could have killed her, or any of the other people with him who didn't have much compunction about murdering people 2 seconds prior. But he's like, nah, I want my G.I. Jane daughter to feel bad. Oh god, this movie sucks so much cock. He pulls out the golem and says, "Murderer!" Like he even does the fucking face. Meanwhile, up in space, Admiral Lloyd Christmas sees what they're up to down on the moon, and he's like, god damn it, they got us. We can't blow up the grain, because the plot deems it so. Then about 40% of the movie from here on out consists of assholes on a farm throwing grain around in slow motion. Snyder recently said that slow motion is a way of embellishing heroic moments that our heroes go through. Totally, Zach. Farmers are Western culture's true heroes after all. Korra also gets her spaceship dug out that was apparently so stuck and beat to shit that it was completely inoperable, which, when the plot needs it, equates to the inconvenience of a roadblock and some dirt in the tailpipe. The last movie had an entire section of the story dedicated to them finding a ship because hers was out of commission. But if she had asked for like 4 people and some Windex, she would have avoided that. At your convenience, you piece of shit movie. Then all the Fortnite characters sit around a table in a totally not contrived scene and give each other 20 to 30 second background stories that sound suspiciously similar. For every one of them, it's something along the lines of, I had a family and the bad guys came to my home world and killed everyone and now I hate the bad guys. Everyone's fucking background story is the same as Gamora's from Guardians of the Galaxy, except lame and in slow motion. It reaches a point where a character literally turns to someone and asks, "And what about you? What's your story?" So if you watch that movie, here is your trigger warning, in case you're overly sensitive to cringe. The rest of the movie is the after-farming extravaganza. The bad guys show up to fight the good guys, and characters do what they want when Zack Snyder wants things to happen. Example, Admiral Bad Guy was told explicitly by his boss and her mentor not to kill Korra, but to capture her and bring her directly to him. That is until Admiral Bad Guy is in a one-on-one confrontation with Korra and decides it's totally okay as he actively tries to kill her, but plot armor deems it impossible. That means he didn't just not need to go down there for the grain. He didn't even need to go down there to get her. They could have just nuked that fucker from orbit and been on their way. But to be fair, that would require a second draft of the script. A bunch of characters die in a battle one at a time in some seriously poorly edited scenes that defy logic. Why anyone would give a fuck about a single one of them will remain one of the world's greatest mysteries from this moment forward. Korra gets up to the dreadnought to blow it up and kills some unsuspecting workers in the coal mining room because she's just a dick. They could be slaves for all she knows, but fuck it, kill them. Apparently this ship is powered by coal and a god. That's whatever the hell this thing is that Korra is putting bombs on. An all-powerful god powers the ship and needs that bump of coal to get her going, I guess.
There's no real hard science in it, you know, it's like, how do the spaceships work? I don't care.
The funny thing about steampunk is that good steampunk actually seems functional and makes sense in context. This is not that. This is Snyderpunk. This is style over substance. This is for the hell of it. It's for the visual ooh. This is bullshit. Anyway, so her farm boy lover dies, and thank God, because he's a mouth breather too, and he even said so in the movie. It's not just me. The guy knows he's a simpleton simp. And the bad guy dies. Again, making his return in this movie totally useless. In the end, Korra is ruminating about killing the king's daughter and sniffling all sad about not getting away with murder. An all-knowing Morpheus character says, well, she is alive. Oh, and I knew who you were the whole time. Can't fool me. I guess my imitation kind of sounds like Splinter. Anyway, at your fucking convenience movie. So they have a mission for the third turd coming this fall. Go find wherever the magical mystical princess is in the next season pass of Call of Duty Warzone. I mean, Rebel Moon 3. If it isn't obvious, Zack Snyder completely misunderstands how to handle character writing. Hardly anything about any character makes them likable or worth rooting for, yet Rebel Moon desperately wants you to. The corny music cues demand it of you when what you're seeing and hearing doesn't line up with what Snyder wants. Korra is a horrible character with zero redeeming qualities. She had no regret about killing a little girl. She's saved by the fact that the girl's still alive. She's also a mass murderer and has flip-flopped on multiple occasions over 2 movies now whether this farm town is worth abandoning or worth getting everyone in the galaxy to die for. Anthony Robotkins is also supposed to be a likable character, but he's an actual piece of shit if you break down anything he's done. Even when he seems to be making an autonomous decision to help out in the upcoming third movie, he actually says it's not his choice to do so. Why? Why have him say that? Give your character some likable quality, something they have control over. He exists in this movie because a robot with antlers and a cloak looks cool. It's the same dark and edgy freshman high schooler mindset he's brought to all of his movies over the years. His heroes having no redeeming qualities has been a problem since Man of Steel. I'd bet $1 and a handshake he'd use the same kind of argument here, that no real person is actually superheroic. What if they were in the real world? Basically, the description of an anti-hero, like Punisher or Spawn. So really, what if every character was stripped of what set them apart from someone like that, and was just edgy and cool, and killed people like Punisher? What a wild, dark, original concept. Funny thing is, even characters like Spawn and Punisher have redeeming qualities. They were the epitome of anti-hero. They were the subversion of expectations from the superheroic trope. That was the entire point. My criticisms of his work in DC aren't meant to nitpick a director's filmography. I want to paint the bigger picture of his problems with characters. Now that Rebel Moon is an original, a story concept and script by him with a couple other names attached, all of his flaws as a filmmaker are fully exposed. There's no hiding behind a defense of but ma themes. Even with a foundation in Batman and Superman, he still pushed back, and he's even been quoted as to why. Because he can. Ian Malcolm would say, "You were so preoccupied finding out if you could, you didn't stop to think if you should." He even suggested once that Batman could get graped in his movie, something he and other real cliff diver directors like Rob Zombie seem to have an obsession with. In the last Rebel Moon movie, he made sure there was a near grape scene because what's darker than grape in space? In the end, when your characters range from one-dimensional to offensively idiotic, you'd think your film could hang its hat on its visuals when it's directed by a man who makes his name off that, as his lone defense of his skill set. I saw one unironic defense of this movie on Twitter. Of course, Twitter. And it was regarding the idiotic Titanic band assassination flashback scene because, of course, it's about that scene. The most bizarrely awful section of the entire movie was praised because Snyder, quote, managed to combine the death of Julius Caesar and the assassination of the Romanovs in one scene. Proof why Zack Snyder is the GOAT. Do I need to say anything or should I just let that speak for itself? Characters are walking contradictions. The story decides the only thing that matters is what's happening right then and there. And outside that, even the technical aspects of the movie are horrendous at times. The unfocused, fish-eyed, washed-out shots are numbingly amateur looking for a multi-millionaire professional. Call this area subjective, call it whatever you want. I call it shit. Snyder's had some seriously stunning visuals before, his awful choice in tone and color aside, but that self-parody remark at the beginning of the video applies here too. I wasn't even planning on reviewing this movie and actually watched the first and second one back to back, and after I finished the first, I tried to put myself in the seat of a general Netflix subscriber happening upon that movie. If I somehow finished it, there's no way I would have gone back for a second movie, and well, the numbers seem to be bearing that out. Snyder and Netflix have received some bad news. The Scargiver is a pretty big flop. So will we get a 6-part series with 6 director's cuts? I think the better question is, will we even get a third? Oh, The Crow 2024. One of the worst movies of the year and my biggest disappointment is The Crow starring Bill Skarsgård. This fundamentally flawed turd nugget is a half-assed resurrection of the 90s cult classic, a movie I revisited beforehand out of excitement for the remake, and found it still lives up to the lofty expectations of my personal nostalgia button. Like the crystal-loving girl you tried to run away from, sometimes critics and audiences align like the planets, and this movie rightfully holds up an abysmal 20% score on the old Rotten Tomatoes. Here's some of my favorite bits of of praise. The Guardian, the rag it is, gave me my favorite quote. The Crow, one of 2024's most atrocious films. Thanks, Guardian. Couldn't have said it better myself. This movie was so bad I had to do an out-of-theater sitting in my car with sunglasses reaction to it. Just got out of the theater seeing The Crow. I would advise anyone who likes the original to not see this movie. I would also advise anyone who just likes movies or good things or doesn't like having a bad time to not go see this movie. Wow. Wow. Skarsgård usually always delivers a good performance, but I can't praise cringe. Sorry. What a weird year for him. In one of the worst movies of the year and in one of the best in Nosferatu. I guess we can't win them all. So what's wrong with it? Well, everything. It's a terrible remake. It destroys the essence of all the characters that were beloved in the original. It's a terrible adaptation of the original graphic novel. It's an action movie with like one fucking action scene. It trades in a goth aesthetic for a brooding, emo-infused disaster that becomes a laughingstock. Seriously, what is wrong with Lionsgate Studios? How have they managed to have a worse year than Disney's 2023? The story follows Eric Draven, a junkie who falls for another junkie named Shelley in a rehab center. Their love affair is cut short when they're murdered by some bad guys working for inserted crime lord number 5 of the year, who has demonic powers that are never explored nor particularly interesting. Not letting death stop him, a mystical crow brings Eric back to life to seek revenge. The problem with most of the shit movies in this video, especially The Crow, is that its script is trash. Eric and Shelley are both in a rehab center by choice, and they escape in such an idiotic fashion within the first 15 minutes of the movie, you have to brace yourself, knowing the movie isn't about to get any smarter. Staying in the center by choice and then escaping to indulge in hedonism makes the characters instantly unlikable, and it never gets better. Worst of all, the movie is a giant bait and switch in multiple facets. Eric isn't really the main character of the movie, Shelley is. She's the driving force behind every choice, every decision, and Eric is simply along for the ride. Even after she dies, the movie is almost focused entirely on her and her exploits, instead of being about a man seeking revenge. This is supposed to be a remake turning The Crow into a gothic John Wick, but instead it's about this junkie Shelley that you absolutely do not like, played by an actress who pretends to have Billie Eilish eyeball syndrome, where they just kind of dead fisheye their way around her skull. Another major issue that I briefly mentioned already is the fact that this is not an action movie. It pretends to be one. It's advertised as one. But in reality, there's about one action scene in the entire thing, and it's at the tail end. It's not even compelling because at that point, another issue arises. He becomes the Crow. Now you might ask, isn't that the point of the movie? And my answer is a resounding yes, that should be the point of the movie. But they wait until the final 15 minutes for him to become the Crow, the thing we've been waiting 2 agonizing hours for. And he's essentially ultra invincible by that point, so it's just gore porn. Ew, it sounds way more disgusting than I wanted it to be. He can get hurt throughout the movie, but comes back together again like fucking Humpty Dumpty. Then by the end, he's basically Voltron. Contrast that with the original film where he's invincible throughout until the final 15 minutes, giving the character an actual obstacle and the threat of death. The villain of this movie is also just a cliche moron, essentially the pathway to the devil who Shelley was sent to. Like, why bring her back? Good riddance to that shit character. The overall tone is so emo that, like Borderlands and Megalopolis, you'll find yourself laughing at the movie. It takes itself so seriously, it becomes the exact opposite. It turns into a total farce. Skarsgård, who deserves way more than what this movie's providing his career, certainly looks the part physically, but even the film's attempts at being a better adaptation of the comic book falls short. His hair is cringe as fuck, looking more like the typical modern day hairstyle than anything from the book. That sounds like a small complaint, but the movie wants to adapt the comic, but almost can't help itself from leaning into the emo cringe. Instead of the simple revenge tale of 2 people who lived in the wrong place at the wrong time, it's a convoluted subplot that involves the devil, the man who does his bidding, and a conspiracy crime syndicate cover-up about it all. Get the actual fuck out of here. Nobody wanted this. It's not overly complicated, it's just overly stupid. Reimagining Indeed, this total turd burger is nothing short of a disaster. One of the absolute worst movies of the year and a film I utterly despised. It gave me a renewed appreciation for the original, for Brandon Lee's stellar performance, and has its place among the more influential and fascinating movies of the 90s. This remake, it's already forgotten. I just got out of the theater seeing Megalopolis, and that was worse than The Crow could ever hope of being. And it might be Madam Web level so bad it's good. I really don't know yet, but goddamn. Let me just say that one of the lines is, "What do you think about my boner?" To pretend Megalopolis isn't one of the biggest jokes I've ever seen on the big screen wouldn't be moving the goalposts, it would be transporting them to another dimension. This quagmire of self-indulgence is a laughably awful piece of shit, but it might be on Madam Web's level of so bad it's good. Francis Ford Coppola has created a pretentious stinker in Megalopolis, a movie about a futuristic parallel to the fall of the Roman Republic, and is ultimately god-tier garbage that's comparable to The Room more than anything else. In fact, Tommy Wiseau could have played a role in this movie, and its quality would only go up. The one thing it's been praised for is its ambition, I guess. I didn't know throwing a ton of money at the screen qualifies for ambition. I thought it's just how the film industry operates today, and he's just acting as his own shitty studio. It's a visually unpleasant nightmare, something Lionsgate Studios has been taking first place in by a country mile this year. At least Coppola wasted his own money to make this thing. Once you see it though, you realize why he had to finance it himself. In modern times, it seems like movie studios are run by pure dumbasses, like the Sony CEO blaming the media for the Spider-Man Rogues Gallery universe failing, because those weren't really bad movies. That's right, Coppola couldn't even convince that guy to release this trash. The only one that would answer the call was Lionsgate, the studio king of producing cinematic bowel movements. And what we have is a movie that's every bit of laughable style over substance, while the director sits back thinking it's actually deep. But whatever he's trying to say gets completely lost in the schlock, a movie that looks absolutely hideous and ends up being a poorly acted, confusing, disjointed joke. Yes, this movie is that bad, on every level, from the acting, visuals, editing, and directing. Although, unlike Borderlands, I could see this Sci-Fi Channel-worthy piece of nightmare fuel developing a cult following. So what's the plot overview of such a movie? That's actually a really good question because it's an incoherent mess, as far as I can make out, because whatever. As a movie that parallels the fall of Rome, it's set in the futuristic city of New Rome, because subtlety is overrated. It follows Adam Driver's character Caesar. I'm not fucking kidding. He's a genius architect that can control time. We know this because he uses it at the beginning of the movie, and then it doesn't matter whatsoever for the rest of the film. He wants to build a new utopia in the sprawling metropolis, but standing in his way is the mayor, Gus from Breaking Bad, or should I say, the usual suspect. His sole purpose is to embody every cliched bureaucratic obstacle imaginable. Why does he want to stop him? Shoulder shrug. It bounces back and forth between reasons, and ultimately, it leaves the audience not giving a rat's ass. The narrative meanders through philosophical debates, political bullshit, acid trips, cross-dressing, and a love triangle so devoid of chemistry it makes The Crow look thrilling. Oh, and Angelina Jolie's dad talks about his boner a lot. It's a hell of a movie. There are so many problems with this film, it's tough to figure out where to start, but how about the story itself? It constantly stalls and goes nowhere, or changes and shifts direction for no apparent reason at all. Whenever you think you're making sense of something, the next scene will be about absolutely nothing connected to that. Nothing at all. Elements that seem important are introduced and then dropped, like Caesar's time travel mechanic, something you think would be extremely important to the film, but has absolutely nothing to do with anything for practically the entirety of the movie. The reason why is because he has new mechanic after new mechanic introduced that ultimately make it into a muddled mess, leaving you not caring one bit about any of his abilities. They just come off as goofy, especially with the horrific special effects. The dude gets shot in the face late in the film. Why the fuck wouldn't the time controlling ability be helpful here? Oh right, because the movie sucks, that's why. There's even a 20+ minute montage of him tripping his balls off that happens for no reason. He's set up for sleeping with an underage girl during this time. Turns out she wasn't really, so the plot thread is dropped and we just move on. It has no impact on the rest of the film. It just happens because this movie is nothing more than a 90s Slider episode fever dream. The characters are also just fucking ridiculous, where you're just laughing at the movie within the first 10 minutes. Just look at these scenes.
Hello. Do you like my outfit?
The depth of these characters rival a kiddie pool, with Adam Driver oscillating between a brooding intensity of cringe and the charisma of a wet sponge, quoting Hamlet at length like a pretentious asshole. He's this great architect building this dream utopia, but all you ever see of this is shitty CGI escalators. Like that's it. That's his utopia. I guess Mitch Hedberg was right. True peace comes from the fact that escalators can never be out of order. They just become stairs. Sorry for the convenience. And Shia LaBeouf does what he can with what he's given, and it seems like he was told to just chew the fucking walls down even if they're made out of brick. He might as well be named plot device number 1, since the role of villain eventually turns to him for whatever reason when the story decides to without any notification. Coppola's attempts at tackling grand themes like societal structure, ambition, and a clash between progress and tradition, that's what I get he's is going for, but I can't stress enough how horribly this thing falls flat on its face. The hubris to create such a gargantuan shit can only come from one of the greatest directors of all time. Truly. That's how big of a turd this thing is. I also can't stress enough how ugly the movie is. I can't believe this thing cost as much as it did considering how poorly rendered all the CGI is. You have to see this thing for yourself to truly understand the depths of this disaster. Oh yeah, this movie. Borderlands is so awful, I memory hold this thing. To the point I don't really remember the story as much as I remember just absolutely hating this piece of shit. It's so bad it had a Rotten Tomatoes score of 0% at one point. What is it Maya Angelou said? I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. That's Borderlands, because I felt used and abused after leaving the theater. An absolutely horrific adaptation of the beloved video game, Borderlands is the kind of mistake you'd linger on for decades. It provides the same sort of anxiety you experience when you're laying in bed at 1 a.m. Still thinking about the time you said, "here," funny when your 4th grade teacher was taking attendance. The acting? Cringe, done by actors only looking for a paycheck. The action scenes? Piss poor, with editing so shoddy it's like the person putting them together went in blindfolded and smashed their head off the keyboard till it was done. And it has visuals so awful they can make you weep blood. This movie definitely has it all. It checks every box a shitty movie should, and then some. It tries to replicate the wit and irreverent humor of the video games with abysmal results, with every punchline landing with the force of a slap from Timothée Chalamet. It answers the question, who can waste a 9-figure budget better than anybody? Its single challenger being Megalopolis, but at least that movie only wasted Francis Ford Coppola's money. Both movies wasted the hard-earned cash of any unlucky person who saw them though, myself included. To actually give a proper breakdown of the plot, I'd have to rewatch it, so that's not happening, but I can certainly give an improper one. The hero and main character of the story is Lilith, played by Cate Blanchett, a bounty hunter with a mysterious past who returns to her home planet of Pandora, the land of chaos and poorly rendered CGI landscapes. She's here on bounty to rescue the missing child of Atlas, the universe's corporate overlord, and she assembles a ragtag team of cliches to accomplish that. She picks up Kevin Hart, who never fails to deliver jokes about his own height. I can't stand this dude, he's like a more famous Burt Kreischer. He has a shtick and he sticks to it. There's also a Groot wannabe and a muscle bro who talks exclusively in grunts and plot conveniences. And there's a teenage furry with autism and Jamie Lee Curtis giving it her least. Banded together, they embark on this quest against aliens, robbers, and humor so forced you could consider a fucking restraining order. The girl they seek is the cliche key to everything, because of course she is. She can unlock the vault, where advanced technology is locked up, conveniently forgotten about until the plot needs it to be remembered. In the end, Blanchett literally gets her wings, because of course she does. They thwart the bad guy, and they celebrate like they're contractually obligated to. I love it. Just from looking at the poster for this movie, you can tell it was going to be a cinematic equivalent of a dumpster fire. But what's really sad is the actors who decided to cash the check. It makes me curious. At what point did they realize what kind of digital abortion they'd be starring in? Actors aren't always the brightest bulb in the batch, but the script itself is so awful, I'd be surprised it wasn't obvious from the beginning that this movie would be an abomination. Cate Blanchett has absolutely nothing to work with whatsoever and feels terribly miscast here, although that's probably the least of this film's problems. She's not convincing at all as Lilith, and it gets even worse once the movie turns her into the Phoenix from the X-Men. Once the wings spread like Harvey Weinstein's prison butthole, I burst out laughing. I don't remember too much from this monstrosity, but I certainly remember that bit of cringe. The rest of the cast is about exciting as a wet fart. Jamie Lee Curtis is one of my favorite actresses of all time, but she certainly has her own Curtisisms, and she brings them all to this movie. Overacting, poor line delivery, you name it, she can do it all. I'm glad she snagged an Oscar for Everything Everywhere All at Once, but other than that, man, has she had a rough go of it as of late. First, Halloween Ends, one of the worst movies of all time, and now this, another one of the worst movies ever made. She needs a new agent, and the less we say about Kevin Hart, the better. All this is what happens when you hand a movie over to Eli Roth, a horror movie director given a major video game adaptation and a 9-figure budget. Lionsgate's been on a roll when it comes to making the absolute worst of cinema, so it makes sense they'd hand this movie over to him, but it doesn't change the fact it's one of the worst productions of 2024 and, generally speaking, one of the worst movies ever made. Like, ever. He reduces characters to hollow shells of their video game counterparts and brings a non-visionary style of storytelling that's as clear as mud. The screen looks like the equivalent of celluloid vomit, and a man who clearly has zero clue on how to direct an action scene. How did he get this movie, one might ask? He hit his big break in 2005 with the terrible Hostel, a low-budget torture porn horror movie that spawned a couple of equally terrible sequels, and he's somehow cruised through the film industry making mostly garbage ever since. In fact, his best piece of participation in film was as the Bear Jew in Inglourious Bastards.
On his feet for Teddy! Fuck
fucking ball game. He went yacht on that one on the fucking Lansdowne Street. Yeah.
And that's really because of Brad Pitt's description of the character. The Bear Jew. All in all, Borderlands is an absolutely skippable piece of trash that hopefully never finds life on streaming or develops a cult following. It was that big of a waste of time. Don't do it, folks. Don't even try to like this one ironically. Furiosa is not the movie you're looking for. It might say a Mad Max saga in the title, but this movie's biggest flaw is the decision made before cameras ever rolled, because it's not quite Mad Max without Max Rockatansky. There's a lot to like about this movie, and while it falls well short of the bar set by its predecessor, it's one of the better movies to hit theaters in the last 6 months. Quality doesn't seem to matter much here though, because it's fallen flat on its face, opening to a paltry $32 million, leading the worst Memorial Day weekend at the box office in decades. And honestly, that's a real shame, because Furiosa is a high-quality action revenge film rooted in established lore, giving more detail to the world that's endured since George Miller launched the series in 1979. Furiosa's origin is similar to Max's. It's a film centered around a mostly silent but persistent protagonist who's chosen revenge, updated for 2024. It's like a mutated John Wick in the desert. Well, it's more than that, but you get the point. And Miller still manages to deliver a moment or two that incite a visceral reaction.
Fucking weird.
A lot of the action scenes seem like a smaller scale version of the same thing Fury Road was doing, just not nearly as impressive. It's probably not good to be reminded of another movie that did it before and did it better, and this is mostly thanks to George Miller's decision to rely on CGI instead of mostly practical effects. I talked about it opening day on Friday Night Tights, and while it's a fun action movie, the box office has spoken. A sad $32 million opening on what is traditionally one of the biggest movie-going weekends of the year. That figure is for the extended holiday, meaning its true opening weekend was just $26 million. To put that in perspective, Morbius opened to $39 million. Fucking Morbius. There's an entire video to be made about how something like that happens, but no matter the reason, it has a long way to go before it's profitable, and it's not an outlier at the Cineplex. Bad movies aren't just bombing, it feels like everything is. Furiosa has a $168 million budget, which seems reasonable compared to budget numbers from superhero films over the last decade, but Mad Max has never been a series known for its box office domination like those movies had. There's no billion-dollar movie in this franchise. The biggest is Fury Road when it hit $380 million in 2015, and the first 3 films were made on small budgets under $10 million. In fact, the 1979 movie cost just $350,000, and Fury Road cost over $150 million to make, and it's questionable if it even broke even at the box office. It surely made a profit by now thanks to 8 years on streaming and home video, but Furiosa probably doesn't get made if Fury Road doesn't get nominated for Best Picture. We've ended up with a pretty good movie by most metrics, but by its very nature falls short as a follow-up, leaving me to wonder why nearly 80-year-old George Miller would decide to make this movie instead of anything else. He has other Mad Max movies in mind, and I've heard complaints about Fury Road being one of the first to start a trope in movies I openly mock, the female character replacing the male character Mary Sue, etc., and that Furiosa perpetuates this further, but I think this misunderstands the argument, at least from my perspective. It's not the concept that's the problem, it's the execution. Furiosa isn't a Mary Sue. She's not a girl boss. She's a real character with weaknesses, strengths, and actual motivation. Everything she does is earned. Things make sense. In essence, for what flaws Fury Road or Furiosa have, they're mostly well-written and tight scripts that don't insult the audience's intelligence. And yeah, that sort of trope might keep audiences out of the theater and might play a factor in the overall box office, but it doesn't change the film's quality. With that said, George Miller doesn't have very many Mad Max sagas left in him, and I question the need to tell a tale we already know the middle and end to. Furiosa as a movie is good, but it's a distraction and not something you'll probably be returning to. It expands on her story, but we don't really need to know it, and it often risks ruining a character's mystique. Remember Hannibal Rising? I don't think we needed to know that Lecter became a cannibal after he was unknowingly coerced into eating his own sister, so he went on a revenge tour and carved her initials into a dude. Yeah, now Hannibal's cool. Furiosa doesn't make the character less than like Hannibal Rising did, but I still left the theater thinking, cool, but why? The Mad Max series is a beloved post-apocalyptic action series that's defined George Miller's entire career. Furiosa continues exploring the same themes of survival, chaos, anarchy, and redemption, cutting through her desire for justice. It works on its own, and you really don't have to watch any of the previous Mad Max movies to grasp what's going on. It certainly helps, but you'll be less inclined to ask, why does this movie exist if this is your first trip into the Mad Max universe? Let's take a look at the story, what works, and if this movie is getting shunned by audiences. The funny thing about a good movie is I don't want to do a full story breakdown like I do the shitty ones. Good stuff isn't worth spoiling, so if you're thinking about seeing the movie, I don't think anything mentioned here will ruin it for you. The biggest spoiler is this: bad people get theirs in revenge movies. That's probably not a shock. We meet Furiosa as a child roaming the Green Place, a hidden agricultural sanctuary in the wasteland of Australia. This magical place has been discovered by local raiders, a biker gang led by Thor, or as he's called in this movie, Dementis. Furiosa's mother heroically tries to save her daughter before ultimately getting fucking crucified and burned alive. As you'd expect, that does not bring joy. And things get worse when Dementis trades her to Immortan Joe as part of a mutually beneficial deal over food and supplies. Furiosa manages to escape, but sticks around for a fucking decade, disguised as a mute boy helping build the war rig, a tanker truck strong enough to withstand the trials and horrors of the wasteland, and hopefully strong enough to get her back to the Green Place. Along the way, she makes friends with Max Rockatansky, Praetorian Jack, the driver of the rig, who's basically like George Miller's White Flag, that you can't do Mad Max without Max. With Dementis ruling Gastown and Immortan Joe running the Citadel, Furiosa gets to decide if she'll be exacting some fucking revenge. And does she, you ask? Could the Green Ranger kick all the Power Rangers' asses at once?
Look at this shit. Hands. Merry Christmas. You get hands for Christmas.
An independent filmmaker and friend of mine put it best with Furiosa. He said, there exists an important pivotal moment in the lifespan of any successful cinematic franchise, usually by its second or third sequel. This turning point typically finds the franchise reworking its identity somewhat, oftentimes expanding its scope beyond the scale of its first couple films, or reinventing itself entirely while attempting to retain some of the core DNA of what made its first entries so appealing in the first place. Smart man that Sammy is. A link to his channel and work is in the description. I think in terms of a movie series reworking its identity, that really started with Fury Road, and Furiosa feels like a continuation of that, if not a half step backwards. It attempts new things like the hammy narration and non-linear storytelling, and feels a bit more experimental under the clearly confident direction of George Miller, but the experiments don't always pay off, especially when it comes to the visuals. It's lacking the sense of identity Fury Road had. The chrome is cranked up in a lot of scenes, but the cinematography feels like Fury Road light. That movie might be brown, gold, and orange as fuck, but it certainly has its own look. Furiosa still has a Mad Max feel, but nothing as marquee as its predecessor. It sucks saying this because it is so beautiful to look at, but it's hard to deny another movie in the same universe stood out more. Instead, Furiosa feels more like someone hit pause, a solid side quest that adds some nice but unnecessary details, and in the end, you're not complaining you did it. Funny thing is, coming off the back of a visual effects Oscar nomination, you'd think the next movie in the series wouldn't take a step back in that department, especially if it came out 9 years later, but here we are. Where Miller decided to use as many practical effects as possible in his last venture to the wasteland, he's decided to take things easy and dive deeper into the world of VFX here. We all know CGI can be an incredible tool when enhancing an image or displaying something on screen that can't be replicated, and Miller used it that way in the last outing, but Furiosa is filled with ugly CGI and awful obvious green screen that took me out of the movie multiple times. Most of the time the visuals are stunning, and as I mentioned before, the action scenes, while redundant, are still well done, but the CGI is ugly as often as it is good. Maybe it's Miller's age that made him want to take the easier route and use CGI and green screen. Hell, who can blame a nearly 80-year-old for not wanting to run around sand dunes for months? As far as the characters are concerned, being a prequel, a lot of them are recognizable, but Chris Hemsworth as new villain Dementis is the best part of the entire movie. You've seen bits and pieces of this character in his previous work. In some ways, Dementis is like a multiverse villain version of Thor. I mean, he's even wearing a cape for most of the movie. Hemsworth is not quite in the realm of Daniel Radcliffe and Harry Potter when it comes to being identified as one character for the rest of his career, but even if he was, he's still clearly having a blast playing Dementis, and he's the perfect balance of villainous and hilarious. Miller and co-writer Nico Lathoris give him some fantastic dialogue to chew on throughout the movie, especially the end, and the only thing bogging down his performance is that fucking nose. Yeah, for whatever reason, they decided to give Dementis the Gandalf treatment, except with prosthetic effects that are way worse than they were 25 years ago, apparently. No offense to the costume department, what's fucking crazy about this is they won an Oscar for this 9 years ago, and here we are with the best character in the movie constantly distracting the audience with the most glaringly fake nose possible. The skin tones don't match well in multiple shots, and it stands out even worse when the lighting hits it from certain angles. He looks like he's only missing the fucking glasses and he complete the nose and mustache Halloween mask. Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello. Anya Taylor-Joy is pretty good as Furiosa, but for me, this character really didn't feel that much more fleshed out after the end. I don't think that's necessarily her fault. I like her in past projects, especially The Menu, and from her recent comments, she has the guts to make a judgment call on how she feels a character should act. She said this recently in regards to a scene in The Menu. The script called for her character to have a single tear rolling down her cheek when she discovers that her date has brought her to a lavish private dinner with the intention of having her die. Taylor-Joy asked, "What planet are we living on?" I was like, let me explain to you. I am going to leap across the table and try and literally kill him with my bare hands. That's good shit. You can see why she's perfect for a role like Furiosa, even though she doesn't appear in the movie until almost an hour in. In a movie nearly 2.5 hours long, almost the first hour takes place when Furiosa is a child. It's not Anya Taylor-Joy that's the problem, really. It's that Furiosa's story has already finished and it isn't a compelling enough character to carry the longest movie in the franchise to the promised land. English actor Tom Burke plays Praetorian Jack, the mid-movie character who helps Furiosa and commander of the War Rig. When he appears on screen, I laugh to myself. Oh, there's the Mad Max stand-in. And he really is, along with the obvious characteristics and mannerisms and filling a similar role to Max in the previous movie. He even kind of dresses like him. It's pretty overt and you're definitely supposed to get Max vibes, like George conceded that you can't have a Max movie without Mad fucking Max. So here's your Wish.com version. To his credit, Tom Burke plays Max, Praetorian Jack, as you'd want, as the stoic, confident, badass mentor. Besides Max/Jack, Furiosa has an outrageous cast of supporting characters, just as you'd expect. From a returning personal favorite of mine, Immortan Joe, that fucking character design is iconic as hell, to the history man who makes himself indispensable in a dog-eat-dog world. No matter where you look, there seems to be someone interesting. Just don't tell George. He might spend the next 9 years making a movie about the gangrene underground maggot lady. I mentioned Chris Hemsworth stole the show and has some excellent dialogue to work with near the end of the movie, but it's solid throughout the whole thing. Like Fury Road, Furiosa is minimal on talking, but when it does, it's usually being uttered by a villain. Whether it's Dementis, Immortan Joe, or some other nefarious turd, and sometimes, honestly, there's nothing more pleasing than some great villainous monologue, threat, or stare down. The dialogue portion of the script is fantastic. It's the pacing that's the biggest problem with the movie. I didn't exactly get bored during it, but the opening segment, one of 5, is over 40 minutes, and you do feel the entirety of the 2.5-hour runtime. Some sections of this movie are unnecessary or go on for too long, and it could have been trimmed down by at least a half hour. I think after 9 years, Miller wanted us to get our money's worth, but I don't care if it's an hour and a half. Just give me a good movie. If it works, it works. For its shortcomings, Furiosa is still a good movie that's worth a watch whether you're a fan of the franchise or new to it altogether. It's a revenge flick with intense gore effects and steampunk-influenced set pieces and costume design set against a dystopian hellscape backdrop. And that's pretty badass. It's not the best in the franchise, but who can complain when it's that kind of description? Well, a lot of people, it turns out. Furiosa received a B+ cinema score, which is pretty surprising. Cinema score is a weird metric because you have to read between the lines. Context is important, and cinema score polls opening night viewers, who are more often than not fans of the franchise who come out to the movie with different expectations than a regular filmgoer. That is to say, opening night viewers tend to be more lenient in their responses, so a B+ is really like a C+. I know everyone hates Rotten Tomatoes, but that's because it's misused and misinterpreted. There is some utility in the black and white data. An 83% audience score on there corroborates the rough cinema score. I wouldn't call it a divide between critics and viewers, but it's interesting to note when you consider the sad $32 million opening weekend. If people were disinterested and opening day audiences weren't exactly pleased, what exactly is Furiosa? Who's the movie for? Is it really because Max isn't in the movie? Maybe it's because audiences are getting smarter about what they watch at home versus the theater. If that isn't clear as day, what movies in the past year felt like actual events that required leaving your home for? Oppenheimer, Barbie, Mario, and that theater event feeling made over $3 billion combined dollars. But a movie like Furiosa, fun as it is, looks like an event movie on an IMAX screen, but you have to convince someone it's an event movie to go to an IMAX and see. Even though I love the theater experience, I don't blame anyone for not shelling out for the $15 ticket and the $10 popcorn and the $10 soda. Wait, seeing a movie just cost almost $50 a person? $50 for one event when a video game you can play for 40+ hours costs $60 or $70. And you can rent the movie for just $4 when it comes to streaming in a month? Ow, it can't be anything like that. Deadpool and Wolverine pulled off exactly what it needed to. It's a damn good reason to go to the theater, for which I'm certain Regal and AMC are grateful to their Disney overlords. It's the start of Marvel's apology tour for their toilet water movies the last few years, deciding to play it as safe as possible and feeding us the McDonald's of cinema, with main ingredients consisting of unapologetic nostalgia and fan service. But it's also a surprisingly heartfelt farewell to Marvel's Fox universe, and Disney thankfully didn't burden this movie with the weight of saving the MCU. They're leaving that to their Robert Downey Jr. panic casting. I don't like describing a movie as fun, but that's really what this one is. It's fun. Not that MCU movies are the height of cinema, but Deadpool and Wolverine is a happy meal. There's no nutritional value and there might be some gut rot, but you're not supposed to eat that shit all the time. It's a little treat. Now, if you've seen a Deadpool movie, this one's like DMX on a roller coaster. You're getting exactly what you expect. Ryan Reynolds has Deadpool down to a formula, probably why Kevin Feige used this movie to momentarily stop the bleeding of the dying Marvel Cinematic Universe. A third Deadpool movie is the safest of bets, an absolute home run in the right hands and something that should be impossible to mess up. And with Wolverine added, this was the predictable, guaranteed box office hit they desperately needed. Just how nervous fans were about Marvel screwing this up is indicative of how far the MCU's fallen. But hey, Disney deserves credit for not fucking up the unfuck-upable, so good job. We're talking about a film that in a bizarre way was going to be above normal criticism, and it has to be if you want to enjoy it. If you think about the plot for 2 seconds, it completely crumbles under its own stupidity, and it was always going to. It definitely feels like Ryan Reynolds and the writing team used the meta-ness of the Deadpool character to justify a lot of lazy-ass writing, but the good stuff is damn good. Does it feel like there's any substance? No. Did I expect it? Also no. Fair or not, Deadpool and Wolverine is going to be judged on if it did what the broader audience expects, which is make people laugh, let Hugh Jackman be Wolverine, and just general Deadpool buffoonery, bullshit, and shenanigans. And yep, all boxes checked. The plot of Deadpool and Wolverine is, well, kind of pointless and makes no fucking sense because of the contradictions it creates, but we'll get to that. The story, little as there is, exists to get Deadpool and Wolverine in a buddy action comedy scenario, and with a fourth wall breaking character, you have a built-in excuse to be as lazy as you want. The movie makes sure to do exactly that, for better or worse sometimes. We start with a flash forward on Earth 616. Deadpool's being interviewed by Happy Hogan for a spot on the Avengers, and he gets told promptly to eat shit. According to Happy, the Avengers is for selfless heroes, not for people trying to win back a stripper. We then go back in time to Deadpool's birthday party, and Mr. Wilson's taken away by the TVA. You know, that obnoxious reminder of sloppy MCU world building? They take him to meet Mr. Paradox, who offers him a spot in the sacred timeline, or rather Earth 616, where we just were. He'll want to take Paradox up on the offer too, since apparently his universe is dying. See, when Wolverine died back in 2017's Logan, the universe lost its anchor being. Or in real world terms, without a lead character to anchor the story, the writing is doomed to go to shit and audiences stop caring. A universe decays over several thousand years when the anchor person dies, but Paradox has a little MacGuffin to end universes faster. Because the movie needs to put the characters in some sort of time crunch jeopardy, contrived or not, damn it. Deadpool, not wanting his world to die, steals Paradox's little iPad and jumps universes looking for a variant of Wolverine to replace his dead one and thus stop his world from destruction. Does all that make sense? Absolutely fucking not. I'll break down the Earth Killer-sized plot holes, but a note. There's a difference between this and other poorly written Marvel schlock as of late. At the very least, I am entertained. An excuse to see live-action versions of classic comic Wolverines begins while the cameo machine simultaneously starts. And dipshit Deadpool doesn't just snag any Wolverine. He apparently kidnaps the worst Wolverine in the multiverse, who was convinced by Deadpool to help him under the premise that the TVA could go back in time and fix his fuck-ups. Instead, Paradox prunes Deadpool and Wolverine to the void, where they start their buddy comedy adventure through various brown CGI spots, running into excuses for fan service and cameos galore. The two duke it out in a profanity-laced fight to kick things off, and it's made for sheer visual glory. Two beings who can't die trying to kill each other doesn't make for a fight with stakes, but it's pretty fucking fun to watch. They make it to the edge of the void where they meet more cameos along with another villain, Cassandra Nova, a variant sister of Charles Xavier. Deadpool gets Johnny Storm killed by exposing him as a Cassandra shit-talker before they eventually escape and meet Nicepool, the other half of Ryan Reynolds' shtick. They gather all the cameos to battle Cassandra and escape the void, and they do just that in over-the-top CGI gore and shenanigans. shenanigans. Cassandra's betrayed by Pyro on behalf of Paradox because the movie needs to give her motivation for the finale, and Wolverine saves her, sparking a momentary truce, allowing them to escape. Cassandra's decided to use the Time Ripper MacGuffin to not just destroy Deadpool's world, but everything in the multiverse, because villain reasons. Thankfully, Deadpool and Wolverine join forces in a video game quick time sequence to stop her, and Wolverine's now called the best Wolverine because the MCU really needs you to care about this one pronto so we can get to the Avengers movies. My movie summary is tongue-in-cheek because as sloppy as the script is, this movie has a lot in common with Spider-Man No Way Home, which I still hold in high regard even though it's a heavily flawed nostalgia-laden film. That's what Deadpool and Wolverine is too, and neither movie has plot holes you could headcanon your way out of. The issues are there, but having characters with a bit of heart goes a really long way in enjoying a story. Objectively, the script for this movie is a complete fucking mess, and you can feel how rushed Marvel was to get this out. It has 5 writers, including Reynolds himself, and the movie was pushed into production then abruptly shut down due to writer strikes. With Ant-Man 3 and the Marvels bombing, Disney needed a hit, so a lot was riding on this to be successful. For what they managed to produce in the time frame they had, they did a great job. This wasn't a movie written by activists with no IP knowledge, it was made from fans. I mean, seeing Hugh Jackman's reaction to the final fight is proof this man is one of us. There's also shoddy visual work too. From the opening sequence of a bloody Deadpool against a Snow White backdrop that looks incredible, to the boring bland brown of the Void. This movie definitely could have used another year of production. It's the kind of movie where they'll Star Wars it to death in the future. With physical media dying, in the near future they'll probably give unfinished movies like Deadpool and Wolverine a new save file, with upgraded CGI and buffs like a fucking video game. They already do it with Star Wars. Watch a physical VHS copy of the special edition from the 90s, and then whatever version they have on Disney Plus now. They're not the same movie. They even do that with movies in theaters. The audio problems from Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse comes to mind, and man, this movie calls for a software update. I also ask the question, why does every movie produced by Disney have that look to it? No matter the director, there's a sheen to their movies with a distinct lack of grit. It really does set this one apart visually from its predecessors. An interesting takeaway from Deadpool and Wolverine is that Marvel's very aware of its own problems. Disney and even Kevin Feige himself have deflected criticism of Phase 4 and 5, digging their heels in the ground about review bombing just this past weekend. They say that while simultaneously taking in all of the criticism they've been receiving the past few years and doing everything in their power to correct it. Deadpool's fourth wall breaks are used to address the MCU's issues head on. Deadpool congratulating Wolverine on joining the MCU, which he admits is at a low point right now, is the first sign Feige listens to the fans. Does he say that he cares what you have to say? Absolutely fucking not. And the movie's plot point about the importance of anchor characters to an entire universe is strikingly similar to a video I made 2 years ago about the importance of having what I called an anchor character for the MCU, like Iron Man was, or wait for it, Hugh Jackman was, for the Fox universe. Yes, I'd say the anchor being plot is more a meta-commentary for the MCU dying without a central figure like Robert Downey Jr. It's why I mentioned in that same video they'd need to be focused on either Wolverine or Doctor Doom, who they'd get to return, by the way. I was right. Feige can say whatever he wants, but it's like someone at Marvel is watching YouTubers and taking notes. And maybe too much at face value. I thought they'd cast someone new as Doom and Wolverine, but they literally got Hugh Jackman back and Downey Jr. for a heel turn. Amazing. That's Marvel's answer to their problems. They're going back to the well, but at least it's better than the shit they've been pumping out, so judging by the box office numbers, it's a safe decision on Marvel's part while they figure out what to do for the rebooted MCU of Phase 7 and beyond. Deadpool and Wolverine's meta jokes show the studio can be honest about its mistakes, even though no one would say it outside a joke that has plausible deniability, but we'll take what we can, I guess. As mentioned before, this movie is going to be viewed outside normal criticism for the vast majority of people seeing it. Who cares if something makes sense in a movie that breaks the fourth wall, am I right? But it's similar to an argument made for Godzilla x Kong, or any other random meta movie like Barbie even. Especially with MCU apathy in mind, mileage will vary on how much even fans care about the story problems. But let's take a look at some just for shits and giggles. Number 1, it's previously been established in the MCU that if a variant winds up in a universe outside their own, their displacement would lead to an incursion and the destruction of the universe they're inhabiting. But the entire reason Deadpool and Wolverine wind up together is because Deadpool's trying to save his universe by permanently replacing Logan with a variant. Yet, in Multiverse of Madness, Stephen Strange was captured by an alternate Avengers squad who wanted him the fuck out of there because his presence would cause the destruction of their universe. Even though their world Strange was, wait for it, dead. There's some validation for the nothing in the multiverse matters jokes. 2 movies inhabiting the same universe contradict each other regarding the overarching storyline. New motto is welcome to the MCU. Who cares? Number 2, a universe starts to decay when its anchor being dies. How did it exist before the anchor being existed? Were there previous anchor beings? Will there never be another one? So the universe's most likely billion-year history rests solely on the 80-year at best lifespan of one human being. I know it doesn't make sense and it doesn't need to, but it's still there no matter how you feel about the movie. And there are a lot of examples in the movie like this, where I don't even think Mahler would want to go through them all. But again, I understand that's the point. Marvel's continuity and overall story has always been played a little loose, but it seems like we're at the point of fuck the story, hit the emergency fan service button. And goddamn does this thing commit to fan service, where the movie isn't so much a movie but more a celebrity guessing game of who could they afford with a Disney level budget. That's where this kind of thing gets you. It is cool to see a lot of the fan service key jangling wish fulfillment moments that have eluded fans all these years. If there was some substance to the first 3 MCU phases, then Deadpool and Wolverine is the start of the apology tour for the last few years of shit movies. Even if it looks goofy. When Channing Tatum walks out as comic accurate Gambit, I was happy to finally see it and also glad we never got a solo movie. More cameos from Fox's past creep in, like Jennifer Garner's Elektra, but no Ben Affleck. Was it budget constraints, or maybe Affleck's done with superheroes as he deals with the burden of existing? This poor fucking guy. The big return though is Wesley Snipes as Blade. Still looking badass at 60, they let him actually say something along the lines of, "There's only ever gonna be one Blade." A line Marvel allowed that I'm sure Mahershala Ali is pleased with. Knowing Snipes' history, it's not crazy to think he negotiated that line into his contract. And Blade gets the best deal out of all the cameos. They wouldn't dare make him look uncool. He even gets to throw the ice skating uphill line for some seal claps. Another person sneaking in from the Fox universe was Chris Evans as Johnny Storm. His brutal murder in the movie serves as a lesson. They can afford Chris Evans for this, and he's 100% going to be back as Captain America in Secret Wars. And yeah, all these cameos are unabashed key jangling, but they're at least here because the film, flaws and all, was made by people who love the property. That's proven by the end credits, where Good Riddance plays over a montage of behind-the-scenes footage. That gets the Hallmark commercial single-serving emotional resonance, but it's simultaneously earnest all the same. And that leads me to Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, who's the big gimmicky selling point of this movie. These stunt casting things are gimmicky since the story has to work through contrivances to bring the character back, but I'm open to anything as long as it's executed well. So does the movie give a good enough reason to bring Hugh back? Yes and no. It pulls the same thing the Loki show did. The character of Loki died during the events of Infinity War, but the writers really need you to be emotionally invested in this time variant version of him the exact same way. So the variant Wolverine, much like the variant Loki, is the exact same character as the previous one up to a point. It's a quick way to essentially bring someone back from the dead without actually doing it. The story excuse to bring him back barely matters. What actually does is the psychology behind it, at least to Marvel. General audiences won't care too much if this is the same Wolverine, as long as it's the recognizable face of Hugh Jackman playing him. For what it's worth, I found the desecration of Logan's corpse at the beginning of the movie a wild thing to write. I found that pretty funny, but also over the top. James Mangold's pulling an Arthur right now, I'm sure. Also, if Deadpool could go back to any point in his timeline, why not just go back to a point where Wolverine's alive? Just whatever. Basically, we just have to accept that Wolverine's back, and yay, it's Hugh Jackman. And damn, he brings the intensity in a few scenes that carry all the emotional weight in the movie, and serve as a reminder of how great of an actor he is. Between Logan and Deadpool and Wolverine, I think he's made up for the decades of movies where he didn't get to say my favorite word, fuck, using it so liberally it even made me question if it was excessive. By the time he dons the mask, the fan wish fulfillment is in full effect. On an IMAX screen, watching Hugh Jackman in full comic Wolverine attire slash through his enemies is 25 years in the making, and Marvel gave us what we wanted all those years. Unfortunately, it's in a completely meaningless sequence where all the enemies come right back to life, but for a quarter pounder with cheese, it fulfilled my needs, empty as those calories are. As for Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool, I have to be objective. He understands the character and plays him well. I just don't find Reynolds particularly entertaining. I think his shtick is best served in small doses because he's a one-trick pony and things get old really fast. Jackman beating the shit out of him and verbally tearing him to shreds throughout the movie is satisfying on a meta level. Regardless of how I feel about him, audiences resonate with him. I've said before that Reynolds as Deadpool makes the superhero movie for people who don't like superhero movies, and I stand by that. So if you've enjoyed that Deadpool series up to this point, you'll certainly love Reynolds in the role again. Deadpool and Wolverine was able to succeed because it wasn't burdened with the weight of saving the MCU storyline, but its success at the box office certainly finally showed Marvel a path forward to save the next phase. Nostalgia, nostalgia, nostalgia. Robert Downey Jr. coming back is no mistake, and it'll play into audience psychology again. Just like seeing Hugh Jackman, it doesn't matter if Downey's playing a variant or different character. Seeing him back in the MCU is the least bold strategy possible, but for Deadpool 3 to be R-rated and open to 200 million, it looks like it'll be good enough to get fans back in the seats for at least 2 more Avengers movies. I'm not going to spoil the story for Sonic 3 because I actually recommend this and encourage you to go see it and just have a goddamn good time, but to set the scene. The third entry in this series picks up right where the last movie left off, with Sonic and pals back with their adoptive family and Dr. Robotnik presumed dead. On Prison Island off the coast of Japan, a shadowy looking hedgehog is being held in stasis, where he's been for over 50 years. But a mysterious someone breaks him free, and this Shadow the Hedgehog is plenty pissed off over what's happened to him, creating complete chaos around the globe and requiring the world policing agency known as GUN to recruit Sonic and his team to stop him. Now, I'm a big Sonic the Hedgehog fan, check the Avatar, and I was one of the people who poo-pooed the original movie from the get-go. I didn't think it was something they'd be able to pull off, and after Ugly Sonic, I threw in the towel. But the change in Sonic's look after fan backlash brought me back. Clearly, the creatives behind these movies adore the character, and entry after entry has turned me into a true blue believer. Is the plot contrived as all fuck? Absolutely. Do I care? Absolutely not. I'm not one to suggest a better story wouldn't make this a better film, but if you're trying to go that route, you're missing the entire point of these movies. I've always been an advocate for character over everything. If you're going to pick something to do right, at least make the people or creatures in the story compelling. It's why I still love Spider-Man No Way Home despite all its problems, because like Sonic 3, it was made by people who love these characters dearly, and that's made clear on screen. As absurd as the movie is, I say this with affection of course, the nuance in Shadow and Sonic's arcs is surprisingly good. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 somehow does what most video game movies can't. It delivers characters with actual depth. Indeed, a movie about a blue rodent and his brooding genetically engineered counterpart manages to explore adoption, abandonment, and emotional baggage better than half the dramas Hollywood churns out these days, and certainly better than that piece of shit Mufasa. It's no indie movie, it's loud, it's silly, but it also has the nerve to make you care about 2 cartoon anthropomorphic animals punching each other. On paper, Shadow should be a joke. Sonic's edgy doppelganger with enough angst to make Kylo Ren look like a well-adjusted adult. The Gerard Way of game characters, the emo John Wick. But Shadow's arc isn't just angry guy learns to be less angry. It's layered, and dare I say, heartbreaking. His connection to Maria, yes, this is a video game canon situation, and his tragic backstory involves a human named Maria, anchors his rage and grief in something real. You watch as Shadow's vendetta consumes him, but there are cracks along the way, so when the inevitable redemption happens, it actually feels earned. This isn't some power of friendship nonsense. Shadow's transformation is rooted in loss, regret, and finding a way to move forward, and somehow they pull it off without making it feel saccharine. Then there's Sonic himself. You'd think by the third movie they'd have run out of things to do with this guy. Instead, Sonic continues to grow. His relentless optimism isn't just comic relief, it's the counterpoint to Shadow's despair. Sonic's own experience with abandonment gives him a perspective that makes his attempts to connect with Shadow feel genuine rather than forced. 3 movies in, and they're still finding ways to make Sonic an actual character instead of just a meme generator. The dynamic between Sonic and Shadow carries the movie. Their conflict isn't just about good versus evil, it's 2 characters dealing with the same pain in wildly different ways. Sonic channels his into hope and connection, while Shadow uses his as fuel for revenge. When they finally collide, it's not just a flashy set piece. It's 2 opposing worldviews crashing together, and somehow this emotional weight is packed into a movie about chili dogs and an evil genius with a mustache shaped like a Wi-Fi signal. What really sets this apart is how it handles themes like adoption and abandonment without pandering or oversimplifying. Shadow's pain over losing Maria feels raw, not sanitized for the sake of keeping things kid-friendly. The movie doesn't shy away from the darker aspects of these themes, and yet it doesn't wallow in them either. No, it uses them to drive real character development. Have I mentioned how fucking terribly Mufasa handles these exact same themes? Yeah, the cynical side of me can't wait to dump on that fucking thing. It's worth mentioning that Shadow's eventual redemption is one of the most well-executed arcs in the franchise so far. The setup is meticulous. His rage, his grief, his gradual realization that revenge won't fix what he's lost. By the time he lets go of his hatred, it feels like a genuine catharsis, not a cheap plot twist slapped on to tie up loose ends. Unlike Scar's bullshit arc in Mufasa, but I will get to that. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 also avoids the trap of becoming overly sentimental. The emotional moments hit hard, but the movie never stops being fun. It's self-aware enough to lean into its absurdity, but not so much that it undermines the genuine emotional emotional stakes of its characters. The balance is razor sharp, and the result is a film that doesn't treat its audience like idiots. And I don't know how to put this, but Jim Carrey goes God mode in this and delivers his best performance as Dr. Robotnik yet. I say yet because they've unsurprisingly greenlit a 4th movie in this franchise, so I'm sure for enough money he'll be back again, and holy shit, I really hope so. This guy is a national treasure. These movies simply wouldn't be the same without him, and he brings the energy this film needs from its primary antagonist. Remember when comedies were a thing and you'd sit in a movie theater and actually laugh? It feels like that again. Whenever Carrey is on screen, he'll have you sitting back and cackling. You can only take a guess at what's scripted and what's ad-libbed, but it's probably safe to say the director let him do whatever he wanted a lot of the time. Not only is he playing Robotnik, he's picking up 2 roles here as the elderly Gerald Robotnik, Ivo's grandfather. Even with him, the themes of abandonment and redemption are really well done. Ivo initially teams up with Sonic to stop Shadow. This is in the trailers, so it's not a spoiler. And if you've played Sonic Adventure 2 1,000 times like I have, you're already in the know. But his feelings of loneliness stemming from having no known family give Robotnik even more depth. Yes, Dr. fucking Robotnik is more than just a silly arch nemesis. Ivo's story comes full circle here. Not everyone gets the same amount of screen time, but everyone has something to do and a place to wind up. Tails and Knuckles want Sonic to trust them, which grows increasingly difficult as the stakes become more and more personal for Sonic. Again, this is insane that I'm writing all this about a kid's movie, but it's fucking good, man. Just damn good entertainment. Lastly, I'd be remiss not to mention Keanu Reeves voicing Shadow. The other cast is great, but Keanu is one of those light bulb moments where you go, yeah, that makes complete sense. Shadow doesn't need to say much, and what he does say is pointed and dark. Keanu brings his most Keanu voice ever to Shadow. He doesn't try any fancy tricks. There's no Bram Stoker's Dracula, "Whoa, wherefore art thou?" to be found here, and it just fucking works. And as a longtime Sonic fan, the Easter eggs in this movie were a lot of fun to catch. Unlike, say, Mufasa, which relies almost exclusively on nostalgia to get you through that train wreck. No, Sonic 3's Easter eggs are in the background or placed in the movie without their point being a distraction. It's something for fans to pick up but are all naturally placed in. From sound cues, music, character movesets, robot and tech designs. They are there, uninterrupting, allowing the story to take place, but awesome for fans to recognize and go nuts over. There's no reliance on prior knowledge for the viewer to get through this movie. The Easter eggs are there if you notice them, like they're supposed to be. They don't break or make the story, or as I like to call it, fan service done right. At the end of the day, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 isn't just good for a video game movie. It's a better exploration of grief, abandonment, and redemption than the other movie we're about to discuss. One the studio probably wishes would be nominated for an Oscar. And that's both a testament to the filmmakers of Sonic and a damning indictment of everyone else on the other side of the spectrum. Nosferatu. Oh, Robert Eggers, the king of making movies critics will fawn over and audiences will endure. Well, I come bearing glad tidings. Nosferatu is one of the most engaging and thoroughly entertaining movies of the year. Riveting from start to finish, it's also one of the most beautiful to look at. But this is Robert Eggers we're talking about. No matter how you feel about him, did we expect any less? Yes, for the man who's typically more popular with critics than audiences, Nosferatu is going to continue that trend. It's this man's work through and through, for better or worse, depending on who you ask. But it's not just god-tier visuals he brings to the table. For lack of a better term, this movie has mood. It is a horror film after all. Starring Nicholas Hoult in his typically frantic style, Lily Rose Depp in a shockingly good performance, Willem Dafoe as his usual reliant self, and the haunting Bill Skarsgård as Count Orlok, or Nosferatu for the uninitiated. It's a horror movie for the ages. There was a lot of hype surrounding this one, and I was a bit worried that it could fall flat, so I kept my expectations low. A friend had to remind me it was actually releasing as Christmas Day approached, so I went in more blind than most other films. I'd also already been disappointed earlier this year by Last Voyage of the Demeter, another vampire/Dracula specific movie that failed to live up to any expectations. Is this a remake? Is it an update? I'd say it's a bit of both, as it keeps the same places and names as the original German film from 1922. That film, in a lot of ways, was the true godfather of horror movies, the originator, even though its themes and characters were at first just Temu versions of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Character names and some motivations were changed to avoid copyright, but the original Nosferatu was so close to Bram Stoker's story that they lost a court battle where all prints of the movie had to be destroyed. Thankfully, some were saved, and the little silent film eventually became legend. 100 years later, we get the update we didn't know we wanted, but now we know we needed. The story of Nosferatu starts off following Thomas Hutter, a real estate agent with the intellectual curiosity of a doorknob, but seems like a devoted husband all the same. To gain a promotion, he goes to Transylvania and assists the freakishly tall and ghoulishly clothed Count Orlok in purchasing property in his hometown of Wismar. Despite his lack of awareness, Thomas realizes shit is going to hit the fan once he meets Orlok, a frightening man whose voice sounds like the devil himself with a face only a mother could love. Well, that and Thomas's wife, perhaps. Orlok becomes infatuated with Thomas's wife and travels to Wismar to cuckold Tommy Boy. The plot is indeed a typically classic interpretation of Dracula, but it's drenched in a melancholy and hopeless mood that most horror films can't come close to touching. Eggers, for all the gripes he gets from audiences, can certainly run a fog machine and dim the lights. It creates an ambiance that's incredibly dark, and it's simultaneously beautiful and haunting. But it's not just the cinematography that makes it a good movie, although I think we often forget, until we see a movie like this, that films are a visual medium, and looking this good is rare. But the mood is set by the connection between Lily Rose Depp's Ellen and Count Orlok. It's the centerpiece of the film, and thankfully Eggers nails it. Pun intended. Hiring Lily Rose for the main role must have felt like a risk, but it's Hollywood, baby. Nepotism is alive and thriving. But she's fantastic here, bringing a sweet innocence that's hiding the truth that tortures her. Bill Skarsgård is also stellar as Orlok, and his performance is nothing short of transformative. Like Colin Farrell in The Penguin, you'd never guess it was him underneath all the prosthetics, and his voice is eerie and memorable.
Don't be surprised if you hear 1,000 shitty impressions of it drifting through the night as the movie rises in popularity.
Sorry, I just had to do it. The crazy part about it is he isn't asked to do too much. A cynical man might say his ability to stare blankly and move stiffly is a masterclass in the bare minimum, but jokes aside, it's exactly what the story needs. The fear of Orlok is from his mere presence, and Skarsgård brings a gravitas to this role only his super tall ass could provide. First it was Pennywise in It, now this. The dude is built to haunt your nightmares. The film's dedication to historical accuracy is also commendable. That's Eggers through and through, and just like his original horror film The Witch, it oozes authenticity. From the 19th century costumes to the painstakingly recreated architecture, it's clear no expense was spared in making sure everything looks appropriately old and depressing, as it should. The real question is it effective as a horror movie? And the answer is a resounding yes. This is where the update comes into play. It's certainly a modern horror movie in some senses, with the usual jump scares, and this is Eggers' wheelhouse. If you've seen his other film The Witch, you'll know the kind of terrifying atmosphere you're getting here. The movie transcends typical horror schlock and becomes a real piece of art, while still giving you that creepy crawly feeling as you're watching it. The film also pays respect to the original movie. There's a lot of reverence for the original here from Eggers, with some scenes being replicated shot by shot. To be fair, it is hard to beat a classic. I highly recommend this movie, and even if Eggers' work hasn't been to your liking, again, I understand that audiences have enjoyed this film less than critics. This movie, on its worst day, is better than almost all the schlock Hollywood's put out in 2024. In my opinion, it's the best film of the year, and it's the last movie I've seen this year too. Talk about cutting it close.